Welcome everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We are recording this, so as I've mentioned before, if you don't wish to appear in the video, you need to shut your video off. But we hope that when we open up for discussion, you'll be happy to show yourselves. But we fully understand if you don't want to. You can chip in, obviously, stuff in the chat. Both Babak and I are kind of being moderators because we've got a couple of technical issues with handling slides and videos. So there might be some sort of changing around. And when we play a video, we'd ask you to make sure you are on mute because we found that we get some kind of feedback and that can be a problem. Okay, straight off, I'm Andrew Stark. I'm one of the co-producers of Walk, Listen, Create. I think pretty much everybody in the room knows that. And my colleague Babak, who's also here, is also a co-founder. Babak has also just launched the Machado Award for Walking Art. I've no idea whether I've pronounced that correctly because it's actually Esperanto, and I haven't yet found a speaker of Esperanto to correct me. But towards the end of this show, we'll invite Babak to perhaps tell you more about it. Okay, so we have tonight two artists who've been worked together over many a year, and the first is Teri Rueb. Is that how I pronounce your name, Teri? I haven't even asked.
Oh, it's always gets a different version, and it's fine. But it is pronounced Reeb.
Right, there we go. So we got it from Teri herself. So that's great. Well, I'm going to just read a little bit about her bio in a minute, and she's joined by Bill Gilbert. So Bill's in New Mexico, from what we understand, and Teri is in Colorado. So thanks both of you for joining us during the day. I think one of you's on Mountain Time. I've no idea what that means. And another maybe in Valley Time, who knows? I'm on Greenwich Mean Time, so, I think everybody in the world knows where Greenwich Mean Time is. So I'm going to read out, I'll start with Bill. Actually, Bill, if I may, I'll start with you. Bill Gilbert lives in, I've now challenged myself, Cerrillos, I hope that's how you pronounce it, New Mexico, in the house he and his wife, Ann Nelson, built with adobe dug out on site. He is Emeritus Distinguished Professor and Lannan Endowed Chair at the University of New Mexico, where he founded the Art and Ecology Area, the Land Arts of the American West Program, and the Land Arts Mobile Research Center, with support from Lannan Foundation and the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. So Teri is an artist whose work combines sound and sight using mobile media. She's known for having established the form of GPS-based interactive installations, sometimes referred to as located media, as early as 1997. Her works have received awards including the 2008 Prix Ars Electronica Award of distinction in the digital music category. And once again, she's got a great biography, which I'm going to share with you. And she's a current professor in the Department of Critical Media Practices at the University of Colorado. So I'm going to hand over to you, Teri, to start.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you, Babak. Thank you, Gert, and the rest of the organizing committee of the Walk, Listen, Create Cafe. It's really great to make contact with this community. I've kind of been peripherally aware of you for a long time, mostly just kind of browsing. And so this helped formalize that relationship. And I'm really grateful to Bill Gilbert, too, who, when I received this invitation, it seemed the perfect fit for us to talk about our work and dialogue around the notion of walking in relation to the Celeste. So we have very different approaches that I think are complementary, and I'm happy to be here today to talk a little bit about our work and open up the floor to a conversation with those of you who come from very different angles, very different cultural spaces today. So thank you so much for tuning in. I wanted to say our talk will generally center around ways of walking that respond to the Celeste, including the stars, planet, and moon, with an expanding focus on the concept of wandering, its many histories, forms, and contemporary implications. As artists whose practices are born of and engender walking, we take different approaches, but find a common ground in a critical approach to movement, place, and process. Our work is positioned within the long history of walking practices, whether or not they are explicitly part of an art and design history, such as Aboriginal walkabout, migrations, the situationist derive, the concept of the flaneur, or the unique works of artists such as Richard Long, Francis Alice, Sophie Caille, Marina Abramovic, and countless others. It is our hope that the conversation will open on to a broader consideration of wandering as a critical act, as a mode of contemplation, and as a way to open ourselves to new insights, and as a fundamental aspect of place, embodiment, and our relationship to the unknown. So we invite the conversation to be lateral and inclusive. Please jump in as you're inspired or provoked. It's meant to be more of a kind of comfortable roundtable. I will present a couple of pieces that are documented in video, and hopefully that gives us some food for thought. And the two works that I'm going to show are Wanderers, which is my most recent piece. It was a mobile app that I created in collaboration with Roberto Azaretto and colleague Jiffer Harriman here at CU Boulder. The work is set on the campus of CU Boulder, and it responds to the Colorado Scale Model Solar System, which is a series of plaques on campus that mark from the sun out to Pluto, including the Kuiper Belt, the relative distances of the planets in terms of their orbital paths. And also you can get information on those plaques about the mass, the various properties of the planets, et cetera. When the Fisk Planetarium approached me about making a sonification of that model, it occurred to us as a collaborative group that this would be a unique opportunity to think the model in temporal terms. So you actually get a sense of the periodicity of the orbital cycles of the different planets, and you yourself are moving within them. So you kind of bring into play another kind of temporal aspect of the experience. So you can walk anywhere instead of the plaque system, which has just an axis, a single axis organizing it that you walk, end to end. This now extended the design into a two-dimensional plane that covers the entire campus, and you can wander anywhere, and the sounds play back relative to your position and their position as they're constantly moving in a dynamic model. So I will play some video documentation to give you a sense of what some of those sounds were like, and then that will mean I have to share screen for a moment. So bear with me. Oh, sorry. One in critical piece. Okay, so hopefully you see image and sound will play shortly. Periodicity is something that I've been interested in my practice for a long time. Among the first works that treated it was a piece called Drift, where the sounds moved with the tides of the Wadden Sea. But with Wanderers, I was able to explore that concept at the scale of the solar system. And to me, that was one of the most exciting things about making this project with the team that I worked with, and also with our inspiration from John Keller.
The CU Wanderers Wrap is an opportunity to hear that solar system in a really artistic, creative, and musical way.
Historically, sound has been a great way of engaging with time. With the Wanderers app, the audience will also be able to use sound as a way of engaging with space, both figuratively, in the sense that they will be interacting with the model of the solar system that we built, but also literally, because in order to use the Wanderers app, they will need to move around the CU campus.
On the phone, we're synthesizing waveforms and putting them together to create the sound design, and also spatializing it, moving it between the left and the right.
It is geospatial, right? Where you are, where your cell phone is relative to the scale model. And it's dynamic, right? It's moving, it's active. It's not just a stationary static.
From the location that you are, which goes from Williams Village to Old Main and beyond around campus, as you explore that space, you can interact with the model by controlling the speed that the planets are orbiting. You can change the direction that your head is facing to as you hear planets pass by, as well as change how far away you can hear these planets from.
Art and science tend to be seen as very distinct disciplinary fields with clear boundaries between them, but I believe that there are common elements between them. For instance, in art, measurement, precision, reproducibility are very important, just as in science, intuition and beauty are important. By making us more aware of our surroundings, both art and science strengthen our connection with the world. And therefore, they both increase our capacity to interact with it.
In high school, my physics teacher, Ken Baker, introduced me to contemplating planetary motion. I remember meditating on Kepler's equations in an effort to feel the relationships of mass, time, and force. With the opportunity to create Wanderers, I got to engage that sense again, attempting to make information that we can understand something that we can actually feel.
So with this app, you can actually hear the motion of the planets, with the inner solar system planets moving really, really quickly, the outer planets moving much more slowly. I like to chase after the planets, which I hear in my headphones.
Okay, so another kind of point that I'd like to just highlight as our theme will merge into the concept or theme of wandering is that the title of the piece, Wanderers, was drawn from the Greek word for planets, which means wandering. Originally, the planets were understood to be stars, but of course they moved in less predictable ways, or they moved in a wandering way. So that was one of the things that we wanted to kind of accentuate in giving the title Wanderers, to allow people to kind of think about the work not as a set itinerary or a prescribed itinerary, but that they could explore it in a more open form fashion. So I had mentioned drift at the beginning of that video. This is a piece I did in 2004. And it was the first piece, I think, where I actually was very consciously using GPS, using the mobile media platform as a way to kind of tap into natural cycles and processes. And in this case, it was the tides. So there's a kind of celestial theme here in that the tides obviously link us to the moon in different ways. And so I'll play a little bit of that documentation and then pass it to Bill. I also wanted to just foreground this documentation by saying a little bit about the technology. So when I first started working with GPS to deliver sound in situ in response to one's movement, it was 1997, and GPS was not even a dashboard technology at that point. It was at least another 7-8 years before it would become familiar in that kind of more domestic or prosaic way. So by the time I was making Drift in 2004, I was struck by the ways in which our everyday perception and behaviors around navigation were shifting in response to this new domesticated technology called GPS, which was really overtaking basic maps and maybe even our direct observational skills in terms of navigation. I've always been interested in different modes of navigation, celestial navigation, etc. But I've also been interested in cartography and the ways that different mapping systems shape our consciousness and perception of space. So this piece was explicitly intended to kind of disrupt both of those conventions. The convention that would assume that GPS was meant to be an instrumentalized technology to direct us in a really point A to point B in the most efficient way kind of technology, and also to disrupt our relationship to maps and to mapping systems, increasingly at that time becoming Google Maps driven. So visitors are given a backpack, but there's no map in this project. You're just sent out onto the tidal flats of the Northern Sea. The idea being that perhaps it might be a bit disturbing, yes, a bit of a challenge because there's no interface to even know what the extent of the work is, but also that might invite us to return to some more poetic, embodied way of inhabiting space. So I'll play a bit of that work now, and then I'll try to keep it short so we can move on to Bill's presentation.
Drift is a responsive sound environment installed along the coastline of the Wadden Sea in northern Germany. Visitors to the installation are invited to wander the tidal flats that stretch nearly 5 kilometers off the coastline at the low tide. While wandering, visitors discover areas of interactive sound that play in response to their movement through the landscape. The areas of sound drift with the tides, so there is no way of knowing exactly where the sounds will occur at any given moment. Absolute position and relative movement are explored as mobile visitors discover that they may also experience this interactive work by simply standing still. The Wadden Sea becomes a metaphor for Hertzian space, as visitors are asked to lose themselves in a space of layered currents of sand, sea, and interactive sounds that drift with the tides and the subtle movement of satellites. The installation consists of a 2-kilometer square region of sound areas that drifts with the tide. At low tide, the sounds linger on the tidal flats. At high tide, they flood the landmass of the little town of Cuxhaven. Sounds are nested in pairs of concentric areas. The sound of footsteps fills the larger region of each pair. Spoken word is layered with the sound of footsteps as visitors enter the inner region. Spoken word passages include excerpts from various literary traditions dealing with themes of wandering, being lost, and drifting. They are presented in different languages, referencing the drift in meaning, inherent in translation. Technical components of the design include a small pocket PC equipped with a GPS card and headphones. Custom software written in Java determines the drift of the sound areas and manages sound playback as visitors pass through them.
Broken hoops on the shore, and at the land a maze of dark cunning nets. Farther away, chalk-scrawled back doors, and on the higher beach, a drying line with 2 crucified shirts. Weiter fort kreidebeschmierte Hintertüren. Und noch weiter, oben am Strand, eine Trockenleine mit 2 gekreuzigten Hemden. Ringsend Wigwams brauner Steuerleute und Matrosen. Menschenmuscheln.
Great, thank you. I'm going to hand it off to Bill now.
Hi, everybody. Let me start saying a round of thanks. Babak and Andrew, thank you for making this happen, for bearing with us through the technical stuff, getting it all to work. Appreciate that. And thanks to Teri. Teri's been a friend for a long time and a colleague, and I'm honored to be part of this with you, Teri. You're the best. And to Gert and the gang, I was fortunate enough to participate in the 2019 event in Sterilus, and it was fantastic. And the work that you are doing to form a community around walking art is greatly appreciated. In the US, we're a little bit more adrift. It seems a little more substantial in Europe. So anyway, it's really nice to be part of that community. So thank you. So wandering is key to what I do. And I'm going to talk specifically about one form of wandering. But I'm hoping as the day goes on that we can get into this a bit more, because I think just philosophically, wandering is of interest. I see walking art and all other forms of contemporary artwork as existing within the context of the Anthropocene, the notion of an Anthropocene, and the fact of climate change. I just don't see how we can get around that. I really like the words of Robin Wall Kimmerer. She says, "We are alienated from the natural world. We're longing for connection. We know what the problem is. We know its drivers. We know all these things, and yet we fail to act. We fail to act because we haven't incorporated values and knowledge together." She's really good. Personally, I think that while we may have plenty of scientific knowledge, I wonder if we don't suffer from a lack of lived knowledge of the environment. I think we have an environmental intimacy deficiency. And isn't at least part of our annihilation so ingrained that we don't even know how to begin to reconnect? So here we are, and what are we going to do? My projects start from this point of admitting that I need to educate myself about the place where I live. I moved to the Southwest as a young man. I've been here, 45 years. I'm surrounded by cultures that have been here multiple hundred years and multiple thousand years. And I realize, that I'm a newbie in the Southwest. So like most humans, I walk. There are many forms of walking, and most of them are oriented towards moving from a point A to a point B. I'm attracted to the inherent subversive nature of wanderings as being non-productive and non-consumptive, as being focused on process over product, of quite possibly not being part of the problem. The Celestial Terrestrial Navigations is one of several series of walks I executed in the context of the Land Arts in the American West field program. The Land Arts in the American West is itself a semester-long wandering. It was designed to provide artists with real lived experience in the full range of environments in the American Southwest, alpine, mesa, desert, riparian, all of that. My walks use the Land Arts of the American West base camps as a starting point for the process of discovering. The walks are constructed to subvert existing patterns and pathways, default ways of moving across the land, and create chance encounters with the topography, the plants, the animals, the weather, everything else as I wander through the place. The Celestial Terrestrial Navigation series was inspired by the completely overpowering experience of staring into the night sky in the Southwest. At Muley Point on Cedar Mesa in Southeast Utah, one of my favorite land art sites, we're camping in one of the darkest places in the Northern Hemisphere. It's 180 degrees of night sky. Flat Mesa, 180 degrees dome of sky. The constellations have been a transcultural method for converting that vast space into place, navigable place, understandable place, of organizing chaos into some sort of understandable zone we can operate in. So I developed the walks based on tracing constellations from the night sky onto the land, literally walking them the star point to star point on the land, and letting these stars construct my wandering path, giving over agency, being willing to just follow a path that made no sense but makes total sense. The series attempts to examine the constellations as mental projections of earlier cultures. I mean, what are these entities, and why are those the ones that were chosen to bring order to the chaos, to turn undefined space into place? And they also create a random encounter with the land based on discovering what's actually living there in this particular place at this particular time. I think what we know about climate change is that everything is changing incredibly rapidly. And so these are, my walks become markers of a particular point. Many of the walks have been constructed around the constellation Eridanus River, given that the rivers are the lifeblood of the Southwest. They're the thing that make the Southwest habitable for us as humans, and they're drying up, and we're in real trouble. And if you've been reading about the Colorado River, you know all this. Okay, so Andrew, if you can put up Elvado Lake as the first walk. This is just a couple examples so you can see how this works. So Elvado Lake is a man-made lake along the Chama River. It's in the throes of a long-term drought. So my wanderings reveal a mix of the native species that exist above high water mark and the invasives that have moved into the exposed landbed. So this satellite map, which shows the lake, is completely out of time. All that's left is the river. It's all, everything that you see as being blue or green-blue is now dry. And the image is surrounded by the plants all named that I encountered, each species that I encountered as I did that particular walk. Similar strategies apply to the Gila. So Andrew, if we can do the Gila. In the Gila, I'm encountering one of the most diverse ecosystems in the US. It's also an ecosystem that serves the Gila River as you follow up this, this chain. Is a corridor for migrations of humans, plants, animals, everything living responding to climate change. So this map that I have today and the things that I have documented today will be undoubtedly quite different if someone were to walk this exact same path in 20 or 30 years. Okay, so this now gets us to the question of how the walks become art. And I think this is a question that was fabulous in 2019. And there's so many people coming from so many different angles. I have huge respect for the solutions that Teri has come up with, that she has been able to conflate, join the experience and the art. I'm stuck in a more difficult position or a less resolved position. And I find this strategy, which I've shown you in the past two examples at Elvado and the Gila, where it's essentially a digital print that's put in a museum for people to see as information, as a signpost for an event, is not entirely satisfying. So the next example is my attempt, while still maintaining this site non-site relationship between the museum as a place of presentation, as opposed to Teri's solution of taking people out to the actual place. But here's my latest solution to that. So this is Kumi, Andrew, if you can put that up. In this case, I was invited to go to Japan and do a walk. It is a river valley, Kumi, and so I decided to do Aridness again. But in this case, I decided to go with a multimedia installation as a way to sort of try and bring the event of the walk better into place. So the first thing that you encountered in the installation was a satellite map. It's got all the star points, and the star points have the GPS points labeled on them. So you can get a sense of the territory and the topography of my walk. I have to go to the next one. So that map is now on the right-hand wall. Directly in front of you is the constellation Aridness laid out in the star points with all the GPS points. So if you come to this museum and you write down these star points, you're invited to go do the same walk I did. There are particulars involved with climbing deer fences and certain things that made this extremely difficult walk, but there's the invitation, that it doesn't have to just be a personal experience. You're invited to join. We have to go to the next one. In an attempt to conjoin this site, non-site in a better way, there's also this print on the wall. And on the right is the constructions that I made at every star point along my path. And on the left is photographs of bowls with materials taken from that site. So here are those same bowls laid out underneath the GPS points with materials from each of the sites, trying to, once again, bring the site into the museum and connect through those photographs of the star points, your ability to envision where that all came from. So all this was part of a single installation, and perhaps a better solution, I hope, to this question of how, for people who do walking art, who are presenting within traditional art contexts like museums, how do we in some way bring the viewer into the experience of the walk? And I hope that's something we can talk about more today, because this is still, I don't pretend to have solved this question. So before I just open it all up, one of the several other things occurred to me in presentation, and I hope we can maybe visit some of these topics. What Teri showed you was two collaborative works. Those are juxtaposed in art practice with personal works. And I think that whole question of whether personal works make sense anymore, whether we any longer have a belief in personal agency, is a very valid question in the context of the time we're in, or whether collaboration between art and science, between whatever groups, really is the only valuable way to go forward. And this whole question of whether media collapses or maintains this separation between human and natural, between cultural and environmental, I think is a really interesting question. And then the next one, and Teri stepped a little bit into this territory, but maybe not full on, and I think it's something else that I found in the 2019 conversation was really prevalent, is what is our relationship as walkers to maps? What do we mean by maps? What forms do maps take? And in what way, I mean, I think Teri solved it, but most of us haven't. In what way are the maps the territory? I think that's a very interesting question. So that's my list. Thanks for hanging in there with me.
Well, Teri, I don't know, would you like to add or subtract anything to what Bill was saying? One or two of he's come up with some fantastic provocations, some great things, and one or two of them touch very much on what you've been doing. So maybe you might like to start with perhaps suggesting your view on collaboration versus personal act of making art.
Wow. Well, I've been really fortunate to collaborate with some incredible artists, scientists, landscape architects, sculptors. And at this point in my career, I find myself gravitating more and more toward collaboration. And I think it's because it's just kind of every project in addition to having a site that brings a whole new set of operations and investigations and research demands, the collaborators as individual sensibilities and intellects brings another layer of just kind of embedded learning to the process that I find really fascinating, and it opens up my own practice in ways that lead me to new discoveries and new recognitions, I guess, of where the work might go, where it could go, in the hands of more people, like more interpretations. So I really do enjoy collaboration. I don't think of it necessarily as a politic. I don't know if you were implying that, Bill, but I'm very much aware of the politics embedded in the collaborations that I've done, especially with site-specific works, where I'm always encountering and working with people who are local to the place, whether they have a formal relationship to it or an informal relationship to it. Oftentimes I'm interviewing or having conversations with people in a landscape that is theirs because either they're transients who live there on an extended basis, or they're people who care for the plants or some aspect of the ecology there in an informal way. There's so many different stakeholders in every project that the politics of that kind of interaction are very delicate and very important to me in my work, and an endlessly fascinating challenge. On the other hand, I guess when I think about the individual inquiry that might be associated with what you were referring to, Bill, as a kind of, I don't know, more isolated practice, I absolutely believe we need that. Maybe even in a particular way now, because I feel like people have a lot of our discourse, a lot of our institutions and modes of production and economic support for the arts has shifted to a kind of sometimes instrumentalized path that demands that artists work outside of that singular mode. And I think there should be more diversity than that. I think we should not necessarily have to answer to the direct limitations of our own subject position as only being solved through jumping onto a particular political agenda, or by collaborating with people to, as often happens, kind of brownwash your work, if you will, or give it a kind of political cachet that it might not otherwise have. That's a lot.
Yeah. Really well said. So I didn't mean to really put it out there as either or. I mean, obviously we need both. And I really agree with you that in this moment that we find ourselves as a species, our ability to work with each other is probably key. We're not going to avoid what's coming. So the question is, can we get through it? And so collaboration is inherently political in that sense. We're going to have to collaborate, get through. And so learning those skills, I think, is huge. I guess what I see is kind of what you were saying, that there's been in this rising trajectory of what got us here, the arts are continually devalued. And so this thing that you brought up, Teri, of, well, maybe our only value is our ability to work with the disciplines that do matter, is something to resist. And I think there is a stripping out of the poetic and the spiritual and the intuitive in this that we have to resist as artists. I think the other thing that I've been thinking about more, and I think that Robin's comment really led me to think about, and she talks about it, is there any personal agency left whatsoever? When the problems are so vast, the notion that, and I have this conversation with my children who really don't believe in personal agency anymore. I guess as an old timer, I still do. And so I think there is something that the arts can do to hold that territory, that it actually matters the decisions we make every day. It isn't just the politicians. So yeah, I guess I'm guilty, Terry. That was totally loaded with all political baggage. But yeah, I guess that's kind of how I see it now.
You have some really great comments in the chat too.
Yeah, well, I was going to suggest, I mean, Bob, you've written a whole essay and you've probably got half a dozen questions in there. But Bob, do you want to, I mean, I know Bob Parks well, and one of the key things that he's always interested in is he's trying to morph from a performance artist to a walking artist. And what does that really mean? And I think Bill touched on that a lot. So, Bob, do you want to sort of explain a little bit about
what I've done? There's 3 points, but I'll just run through them. As a performance artist since the mid-60s, my belief is morphing into walking art, which describes an exponential curve. If you consider performance art using individual consciousness, where walking art in reality is 8 billion potential consciousnesses, which you intersect in the process of walking. It blurs to include cyberspace through. Then you are introducing the universe. Something I can't remember. An even greater. If you're introducing the universe, that's an even greater expansion. I can see how being in the presence of others in the act of walking, even passing by, this would work with things. How would this work with things billions of miles away? How do I get my head round this on the assumption of performance art morphing into walking art? Then I go on. I get that we're a high percentage of water, so already we're tidal. We're affected by inside out by the moon. Can this extend to planets and stars? Now, the second point to Bill. What's the significance of Robert Irwin's installation at the Getty Centre in terms of collecting indigenous ecologies, almost as a gigantic minimalist sculpture? The Californian Ferris Gallery artists have a phenomenological approach to perceptual psychology. How would you describe your process? And the last one is the cybernetic hypothesis problematizes data. I was at the Findhorn Eco Village this weekend, and it turns out it's not popular with the villages because they don't pay their taxes. So there are real things that can... Now, I don't know if you can pick up on any of those points.
Okay, let's see. Well, the Robert Irwin thing, my wife's a landscape architect, so fortunately she's not in the room because, boy, would she have something to say. I mean, I'm going to leave that one if that's okay, because I think it's a hugely problematic piece. And maybe let's go to Ferris, because I think this whole question of the phenomenological approach, it's certainly the time that you and I come out of as a way to, this was a dominant perception at the time. With the land arts thing is dominated by guys like, Roden Crater and Terrell, and he came out of that whole same phenomenological. So here's my thing. I think that I use the walking as a personal endeavor, and it's essentially a walking zazen, that I try and shut the hell up and stop all the little movies that run in my brain and actually try and pay attention to what's out there, because I really don't think we know a damn thing about the world in which we live. So in that sense, yes, I try to become present and pay attention and forget the human narratives, all those things, the baggage that I carry around every day. So yeah, I would say that's where I come down on that one. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Can you address a couple of the other ones, Terry? Does that mean anything to you? The thing about the way in which you connect meaningfully with the stars in relation to, I see walking art as essentially a human interaction, but it's expanding enormously in terms of, objects you find in the process of walking, but even further, the universe, all that. What are the philosophical implications of that for you?
So I guess I might just start by reflecting on your reference to cybernetics, which has, different kind of waves and schools of thought historically. But what I find interesting in a more current conversation is that notion of a distributed agency that's radically distributed agency. And as an artist, I have to translate that back into a question about our fundamental embodiment and how we might connect to the reality that our embodied agency is not only implicated at cosmic scales, but that we might also ourselves take very seriously the fact that our every moment is reciprocally implicated by those elements all the way out to the stars, right? I don't know how to get there in my practice at the moment, but I am grateful to be back in the American West. I lived on the East Coast for the last 30 years, and I've been trying to get back here for decades. Bill has been instrumental in making that so. And one of the advantages that it brings me as an artist is being able to have a daily sense of where the moon is rising, where it's setting, where the constellations are, to be able to watch lunar eclipses in my own backyard, and to develop a relationship to those processes that's really personal. I think, when I did Drift, I was living in Baltimore, and it was a faraway landscape in northern Germany that gave me the experience of the extreme tidal conditions of that place, which are a bit like Mont Saint-Michel, but you get this really extended flat expanse at the low tide. But very difficult for me to form what I could consider a really authentic relationship to that site as someone coming in for a even if it was a long-term residency, to make that piece. So I don't know. I'm answering you from a very personal place right now. I haven't translated that necessarily into new works, but in addition to that link to our grand scale environment, landscape, celeste, cosmos, I'm also really interested in the kind of vibrational experiences that we have at a really intimate level through sound, and sound as it comes to us from distant places or from interior places, from provocations. I think some of the work I've done more recently in collaboration with an acoustic engineer, has been toying with frequencies that actually can affect us at the really fundamental level of our polyvagal system, if that means anything to you, a kind of fight or flight response that governs so much of our behavior, whether we're conscious of it or not. This is a kaleidoscopic question, and I'm grateful to you for tossing a rock into this water and letting the ripples go.
Can I just say, for both of you, all I know is Boulder, Colorado, and what a fantastic, and the whole of the Colorado River, and also New Mexico, which is in the foothills of the Rockies. You've got two absolutely prime landscapes that are so dramatic, and I can see. Thank you.
They're very inspiring, and they're also very fraught, especially right now with the issue of water. So yeah, I'm grateful also to see the work that you've done, Bill, with the drawing on the river in the sky. How that might touch down to the really incredible tensions that bring us together in new ways around the watershed in the West: Utah, Wyoming, New Mexico, Arizona, and California.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that there is, topography matters. Desert peoples around the globe share certain orientations. This whole thing about the night sky. I mean, it's between sailors and desert people. That's who really navigates on Earth based on the sky. And I think that as this whole thing is coming down in the West, water is the key, and more people are moving to the West, and there's less water. So it's big. But I guess the root to me is, these constellations, if we just own our own cultural constellations, so go back through, Greek and Arabic traditions, what is it that we put up there and why? What is it that we need to organize chaos around? What is the meaning for us in wanting to look at something which is really, if you think about the constellations, they work as a 2D plane, but in fact, they represent vast time and space. Those stars that you bring together to call Cancer are actually strung out, across the universe. So that whole thing that we're doing there, I think, is quite curious, and it speaks to us as humans, and it speaks to the commonality. And, it's interesting to me, as someone practicing today, to choose some things that have meaning to me. So, when I'm in the mountains and it's full of animals, I use Orion because everybody up there is a hunter. It's that, how does that carry forward is of interest to me.
Well, I think I'd also be able to. I'd like to chip in a little bit here because, we're just had a full moon, and so therefore in London we've had absolutely. We could all predict it. We were going to have bright, clear skies during the day, and we're going to have a heavy frost, and we get that pretty much every time we have a full moon in winter. And of course, the full moon means the river rises, temperature drops each time the tide comes in or out. And the vast majority of people who live around me have absolutely no idea about that because, they're so almost kind of sanitized to the natural world living in a metropolis like London. And to be absolutely honest, I'm not sure how many of the people around me actually know of the constellations of the stars. I think they know the constellation of the tube map, but they don't actually know the constellation of the stars or whatever. And extraordinary, I know it may seem, but just within half a mile of me is I mentioned Greenwich Mean Time, but of course there's the observatory there, the whole creation of navigation around the world. Much of it stemmed from people creating and inventing all sorts of things to manage our world and how we navigate. So, and it all happened within a few minutes walk of where I live. So I'm kind of aware of the kind of historical significance of humans trying to rationalize something they couldn't rationalize. And now we're kind of at that point almost where I think a huge number of people live in cities and are so already so distant from the nature that surrounds them, the elements that influence their not only their day-to-day being, but their physical. What I find extraordinary is, Bob, you rightly said in the comment in the chat about how many people, how much of us are water and how much we're affected by the tides, and yet, we know from long ago that if you get your hair cut, around a full moon, or you have surgery around a full moon, something will happen to your hair and something will happen to your blood, and it's all based on gravity. And yet these sorts of almost they've become put aside. Now we've gone all digital and everything's on the internet. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like we moved to the cities and lost connection with nature, and now almost because we're getting so tied into the internet, we've kind of lost connection with ourselves, our own personal understanding of how listening to our own bodies, if you like. So I'm kind of really fascinated by what you guys have set off here. I could see this, I could see this discussion going a long way for a long time. But I want to make sure other people get a chance to pitch in and say something or ask a question. So, is there anyone else out there? Is it just the four of us at the moment that are chatting?
I do have a
Anyone else?
question. It's
Jump in.
yes, it's Edward Hamlin. I have a question for Teri. One of the most interesting sonic experiences I've had in the last few months was listening to that sonification of the black hole that was observed by the James Webb Space Telescope. I don't know if you're all familiar with that, but there was someone who did a computer, I think, generated sonification that was based on, I think, the intensities of the infrared observations as the black hole was rotating, if I'm remembering correctly. My science may be a little shaky. But Teri, from Wanderers, from the video that you showed, I'm just wondering if the specific sounds that one experiences are based on mathematical or, like celestial mechanics, mathematical things, relationships that are going on between the planets. Is there a mathematical foundation behind those? Are those sonifications of equations? I'm just curious what those are and how you arrived at them.
Yeah, so thanks for that question. I don't know, just quickly, I don't know if you've read any of Jana Levin's books. Black Hole Blues. You'll appreciate that. It talks about the science and the early days of sonifying black holes and really deep space.
Terry, could you pop that in the chat? Could you write the book?
Yeah,
Could you
sure.
type the book in the chat just so that everyone
Yep.
can check it out?
Oops, Black Hole Blues. So yeah, that's just an aside. It's a fascinating area. The sonification was done by my colleague and collaborator, Roberto Azaretto, who is a composer, and he's currently a doctoral candidate in our program here at CU in critical media practices. And he had it's actually, if you go to the website, if you just plug in Reeb and Wanderers, it'll come up. But there's an explanation of the sonification scheme. Very interesting sets of challenges that came up. But basically, every planet has a kind of sound signature of its own that's based on a chord structure that represents the proportional mass intervals between the planets. So there's a bass tone for each planet, and then the next 7 tones up or the next 6 tones up are based on that interval between the masses. It's not exact. He had to do a kind of compression and a kind of remapping around the proportional difference, not the absolute difference, because the scale would go beyond our human range of hearing. So each planet has its own sound print, if you will. And then, of course, they're set in motion through our other collaborator, Jifra Harriman, who did the software development, worked with a software called PD, Pure Data, which is a free version of Max MSP, if people are familiar with that wonderful old and robust platform that was developed for electroacoustic music composers originally, but I've used it since 1996 to manage data. Anyway, he worked with PD to create a real-time synthesis engine that would constantly be calculating and updating the relative position of the planets as they move along their orbital paths in relation to each other. So it's a model. It's not like if you froze it in time, it would map directly to what's happening in the sky, but it's an abstraction. And of course, when you're in this enclosed, you're hearing this synthesized sound through the headphones. As you move through the space of the campus, and the sounds are spatialized. So you're getting a kind of left to right or right to left panning, and also, you know, volume is louder if you're closer to it, or if it comes closer to you in its orbital path, and softer as it moves away. So it's this very dynamic sonification of the temporal scales too, if you will.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank
it's data driven ish.
you. I figured it was. I just didn't know what the data was. So that's very helpful.
Fascinating. No, it's a really fascinating layer to the work that is elaborated on the website if you want to know more.
Thanks.
I think Richard had his hand up as well. Richard White.
Yeah, I did. But the point or the question I wanted to ask kind of goes back really to what Andrew was talking about, and that sort of that experience of natural phenomenon. And so he was sort of suggesting that we're all in this digital world, and that our experience of natural phenomena is dulled in some way. And so, so where I live, we have massive tidal ranges. I live right on the end of the River Avon in the Severn Estuary, and we have these huge tidal ranges where you get much the same spaces that you were working in northern Germany. But where the bit where I live is actually deep. It just goes, suddenly the river isn't there, and so twice a day there's just a little trickle going down, and twice a day it flows right up really, really high. And so that was sort of that's observation, and that where that visual change is so dramatic, people are tuned into that. And so I'm not quite sure that I agree with where Andrew was going in that. I think there's a kind of pattern recognition thing that goes on. That if you see those patterns, so like the patterns of the stars, you know, once somebody long time ago told me, oh, that's Orion, and there's a story associated with it, I can't unlearn that. And I think we see these things, experience these things around us, and we you lock onto it because it's a kind of a pattern that makes sense. So that's broadly what my thought. You know, but what I wanted to ask you is I wondered what the experience, you know, talking. So we saw a student walking back, a young person walking back campus, experiencing the solar system, and I wonder what comes out of the other side of that. Is that a more embodied sense of where the individual is in space? Is it more of a sense of, you know, one's insignificance in something that's got this kind of massive scale? So it's partly it's an asking a question about what your creative intent was with that. Or just to see whether it's possible, and partly it's a question about so people using that, what did they say? What came out of it at the end of that? So there. Thank you. Great presentations too, and I missed a bit because something dropped out here, but thank you. It was really, really interesting.
There's I'll try to hit on a couple of things you brought up. So my intention, and my collaborators may be different, but my hope was that people might experience this kind of transmediation of the solar system model, the scaled solar system model, in such a way as to be struck with a feeling of their own tininess in those grand scale processes, and also maybe their own intimate relationship to them as an embodied experience. So rather than even conceptually contemplating the numbers of it all, or the even visuality of what we often are presented with in these abstractions of planetary movement, that the sonic aspect and the spatial and temporal domain that opens onto might create a kind of resonance at a very personal scale. Talking to people who have done it, I have found that people are firstly surprised at how it kind of forces them to slow down. It's not like you can go out and get the whole thing as we might with a kind of map, right, where you can sort of see the whole panorama at once or the whole terrain at once. So you have not only the kind of immediate kind of linking of what you're hearing to the model, which is physically there if you're paying attention to it. Some people cling to that model. But what I'm more interested in are the people who realize, oh, if I go out this far, to where Mars is to the north versus where Mars is to the south in terms of its orbital path, there might be, you just discover relationships at a different scale that invite you to wander in different ways that also slow you down a little bit. It's also not a kind of sonic experience. If you're in the inner solar system and you have the speed set really high, it's going to be super cacophonous and like really fast paced. It's set to a kind of medium pace if you just do the default when you drop into the inner solar system, but you don't have to start at the inner solar system. But I'm just describing that's probably the most vivid kind of if your entertainment tempo preference is to be bombarded, you can have that. But actually, the greater part of it is the outer solar system, where things happen very, very slowly, even if you're speeding up the compressed time scale of the model. And so it's kind of interesting that people, for the greater part of the experience, are cast into this kind of relatively sparsely populated sea of sound. And it tends to kind of lead them to reflect on that aspect of how different these masses and distances and temporalities are. But I also wanted to just hop back to something that you were alluding to in the first comments you made in response to Andrew. And I have found what I returned to a philosopher of technology, Don Ide. It's IHDE, and he's at SUNY Stony Brook, and he writes on also the philosophy of sound. But one of the concepts that he puts forward that I really love to share also with students is that even Galileo's telescopes were another way of apprehending the world. They didn't necessarily intervene and diminish or pollute or otherwise threaten the purity of our direct senses when looking at the moon. It's another dimension to our perception, to our perceptual realm, our circumambient space, if you think of Yifu Tuan. And I love contemplating that. I really love thinking about media. And it's challenging because not all media have the kind of innate poetry of a telescope and suggesting Galileo's gazing at the moon. But I'm not sure that they aren't all part of our sensorium in just new ways that give us access to some things and maybe block access to others. But I guess that's kind of always part of what we're encountering as the change in our perceptual apparatus, even if it's as slow as evolution.
I think she did pretty well with that.
Okay. Richard, do you want to say anything?
No, apart from thank you very much. Really interesting. A couple of good references there. And yeah, I do think this is all about, this is the kind of more than human stuff where we're adding to our ways of perceiving the universe and the world around us rather than limiting. Thanks.
Now, Babak had a question. I've also noticed that Fiona wrote one in the chat and was partially answered by Bill. But Babak, you had a question.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Teri and Bill. My question is, sort of like for Teri, but anyone can answer because it's a more generic question. The examples that you gave in your presentation are examples of generative audio based on natural processes, but they're also you made them a while ago, right? One was in 2004, and the other one was before that even? I don't remember.
2021 for Wanderers.
Oh, that's very new. Okay. I didn't get that. But have you got maybe other examples that you know of where apps or tools create generative audio based on processes related to the consumer of the work? Or maybe anyone else has examples.
Yeah, I can jump in and just quickly say, I really wish that there was a bigger developer community in the Android space, but and PD, pure data, which of course, being kind of born of Max MSP, is natively meant to do sound synthesis. It wasn't born to do mobile app, do that on mobile devices necessarily. So it's a bit of a challenge constantly to kind of move with whatever sound engines are available, most of which are directed to video game development, which is a different kind of set of operations. But there is a guy named Hans Steiner who's been for a long time working on iOS platform only, but creating really incredible things with PD that draw on a user's immediate behavior and synthesize sound in relation to that. And just chat it. I just put his name into the chat. I'm so sorry. There's another fellow who we were in touch with who's in Austria right now. I would have to look it up and send to you. I know that he's in this space. I don't know if he's publishing apps as much. Oh, and this is, okay. This is really bad. This is like the professor in the classroom who's losing their memory, which is, I'll own up to it. But there's another fellow who I used to work with more closely, who's at the Bauhaus University, Weimar, who did, I'm forgetting his name, but I can put in the chat the name of the app that he developed, which was really cool. And it was called, Phonorama, which is a little bit kind of silly, but it's a good name because what you're doing is you're holding your mobile phone and you can place sounds that will spatialize relative to your movement. And he did a great job realizing it. I don't know if it's still functioning because the operating systems are constantly changing, and I don't know if he's updating it, but he published a lot around Phonorama, so you could find his name pretty easily. And if you can't, let me know, because I've got an email thread there somewhere. So there are little pockets here and there of people doing it, yeah. And since maybe 2007-ish, 2008, that's when I became more familiar with some groups of people, mostly kind of from a musical perspective, though, which is great, but just as a distinguishing factor.
Thanks.
Yeah, because I was going to leap in and say that I was trying to work out when it was. I think it was 2013. I did a series of walks across London, which was eventually called the Expedition into the Digital Unknown. And at that time, we were kind of exploring what things could be done with various technologies, which we could retrieve or consume by using our smartphone. And I was going to say that one of the things I'm sort of kind of interested in is that, you know, have we seen a valuable advancement in GPS technologies and how we can consume them that helps us as walking artists to develop more creative work? Yeah, does that make kind of sense? It's a bit of a challenge, really. Chuck that one in, but I kind of feel that when I look back to 2013, I think it was 9 years ago or something. We conquered pretty much everything that people are kind of talking about now. What can we anticipate happening in the next 5 years, maybe, which may come from GPS, or digital technologies that might, you know, open something up, and we actually create new work which is, you know, prompted by these new technological changes. Would anyone like to pitch one on me and say what's going to happen next? Silence reigns.
Yeah, I'll throw in my prediction, and that is AR glasses, not VR, AR. That's going to be the next big thing. And well, you've got Snap, I think, who already was playing around with this or has been playing around with this for a few years. But the rumor has it that Apple is going to release their AR glasses this year. And if they are immersive and they are AR, I think it's going to change the world. Because then suddenly there will be a secondary reality that will be imperceptibly laid over what we see without us realizing that what we see is not what is there.
I've got something to add. I've got something. It is now neurologists think that we see controlled hallucinations. Being from the era of psychedelia, not having taken drugs or anything, I believe the future is through hallucinations, actually. And Suzanne was very much into that. So I think that's from internal space rather than a technological. It's adapting our own perceptions. So I think the future is with hallucinations. That's my prediction. That will grow in.
Right. I really do, and I have a lot of optimism about that, and the incredible progress that has been made in research around mental health issues, especially in the use of psychedelics. But I mean, in Colorado, psilocybin mushrooms were recently legalized, and you see. It's really strange. I'm not sure how it's all going to play out, but it's remarkable how people just needed permission from the government, and now their attitude has really changed, and there's a much more conventional, like mainstream acceptance already that I've noticed of, you know, microdosing, let's say, right? But I guess the reason I hope that that's the direction that we begin to attune to, as opposed to necessarily seeking alternative realities through intensified simulation, is because it might hold the hope to return us to our bodies in a way that's more integrated and connected across these different scales that we've been talking about today.
You're touching upon, as I said, the sound of the spheres, and these are eternal truths that great spiritual healers throughout the world have acknowledged.
I think it started becoming answered, but it might take too long. I think it's also a very substantial question or part of the artistic practice turning into a focus on our environmental changes and onto a very political aspect, I assume. So for the moment, I'm happy with the answer Bill gave, but maybe Bill wants to add something to it.
Well, that was, I think that and this can be my close too. We can do a whole lot here at once. Dualities. And I think this whole question of art and its political aspect is one that is not necessarily beholden on everyone. That I certainly now see in my position in the Southwest, in the sort of center of climate change, that my work has to address that, but that doesn't mean everyone has to address it. I think that we have tended in our culture ever since the Enlightenment to stress dualities, pit things against each other, mind against body, whatever, technology against nature. And, that's really not inherent in what we do. It seems to me today that, we've had a man and a woman as the center of this. We seem to be able to talk back and forth between each other. We have somebody who's very analog oriented and someone who's very digital oriented. Our work seems to speak back and forth fairly easily. So I think that yes, that my work is inherently political at this point, but I'm not pushing that as anything as something that everyone else needs to do. It's just if there's a richness to my work, I guess maybe it does reside in that I'm really focused on where I am and what's going on in this place and trying to use my body as well as my mind to articulate that.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is also what brings you together again, Teri and you, in this conversation also, because it brings also people into movement. Teri's work leads people to put on earphones and walk around the campus. And also you presented a work where people can also take the information and do the walk for themselves. And this is also something I really like about walking art or walking as an artistic practice, as I teach my students these days, is that the variety of expression is nearly endless, and which keeps me going literally with this artistic research also, because it brings really the diversity of each artist and interest, and also shows what it's what is the focus of the artistic practice of each member. And I really hope it will stay diverse, and I'm really curious about what the AR goggles will bring into the vastness of artistic practice too. But still, I hope that also every new technology being invented might also lead to us going back into nature, going back meeting people, and going back to taking care of our nature and environment. Just like you two have different aspects, but motivations also to motivate others.
Yeah, amen to that. And I think your show and your catalog really demonstrated how we don't all have to get on a bus. We can go our own way.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah, I might just.
Oh,
Tamsin, yeah. Go.
Tamsin, please. Yeah, your call.
Well, yes. I mean, it's starting to be opened up anyway. I participated in Claire Hines' project. She's involved, and she was on one of these cafes a while ago in sounding stone. And so I participated in that, and I was very fascinated to discovered that if I followed her score, and I wasn't taking any substances at the time, that the sounds that came out of me were very similar to the sounds that came out of her. And then yesterday I was listening to a couple of Viv's sound walks, and that the vibration from her voice wasn't dissimilar. And I understand that she walks and responds to the landscape she's in. This is her sort of 2023 project. So yes, if she's interested in speaking, I'd be very interested in hearing, is it not really what Teri was talking about, that if we slow down in the landscape, and if we really are, as Bill said, in it and embodied, can the response not just come from us without any substances to get us in the zone?
Well, I'll just briefly respond and say, no, I don't take any substances to do it. Yes, I agree with you. If we're really embodied, if we're listening, for me, it comes down to listening. If I'm really listening, then I'm open. And it almost feels the opposite of hallucination to me. It feels almost like you're peeling something away and just kind of being with, whatever your idea of reality is, but it feels like you've taken layers off. I may be misunderstanding the idea of hallucination, but it feels, when I talk about hallucination, I think of myself as going out of my body, and for this, I'm just very much coming into it. So. Thank you. Thanks very much. Very, very interesting talks. Really set me off thinking about a lot of things.
Okay, so I'm going to say a big thank you for everyone joining in, especially obviously to Bill and Teri. But Bill and Teri, you get the last word.
Oh, I had mine, Teri. Go ahead.
Okay, you're clocking out. Well, of course, I want to thank this group for a really generative conversation that brought a whole new set of names and references and directions for future thought to me. Very grateful for the opportunity and look forward to more cafes. I was reminded of Tim Ingold's work as you were speaking, Fiona, and just the notion of the idea that a way of walking is a way of knowing, and that each of us have our own unique way of walking that can become part of a conversation. I think even when Bill and I first started talking about making this presentation today, that was the question that he brought up almost at the beginning, as sort of sense, well, we can assume everybody walks, but there's so much diversity within that in terms of what we mean when we say walking art, and so I'm hoping that something in that anthropological turn, and I know that anthropology has had its own number of turns to the point of indigestion around its own sets of assumptions and anthropocentrism, but if we can revisit this idea regularly for ourselves and contemplate what is our way of walking, and how can that everyday practice gain more visibility or audibility or legibility through forums like this, but maybe even more expanded spaces that I think that's one of the great things about Walk, Listen, Create. I wouldn't necessarily call it an art platform, even though I come to it through that channel. And so the more we can kind of see tentacles out and little spores that infiltrate other different kinds of pockets of conversation, I would hope that we can all bear witness to that and bring that forward as a collective. It's what you're doing already, but I guess my comment is just to throw into the mix that set of practices that don't get rarefied or codified or even named necessarily, but are still part of what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you, Terry. And Bill, we were offering you a final word, but you feel you've said your final words. Yeah?
Yes, I thank you all. I thank Teri for inviting me to join in her gig. And this has really been enjoyable, and it's reconnected me to that fabulous experience in 2019, Fiona and everybody else that I met there. So, Viv, yeah, thanks so much.
Okay, everybody.
And we hope to see you there this year, Bill. Come over to Press Bar.
Yeah, well, we'll have a conversation about that.